We're still in a slow motion crisis, watching the U.S. head for an inevitable collapse. What I've noticed when I check the news is that the U.S. official deficit has now reached that magic number of $40 trillion. The U.S. is now spending $1.7 trillion on interest payments since October, compared to $800 billion on defense. This is unsustainable, and people in the financial industry who really know what's going on know that the United States is bankrupt. A good example was Japan sold $67 billion worth of U.S. treasuries in May, and now suddenly the U.S. Treasury Department announced they're bailing out Japan. What that really means is that if Japan dumps their U.S. treasuries, there's no one there to buy them. So the Americans basically said, we'll buy them from you. We'll give you these dollars. Please do that. And they also threatened Japan in order to keep things going. But these sort of manipulations don't mask the underlying reality. The International Energy Association has just said that the world, which actually means the United States, has a 1.8 billion barrel per day, maybe a million barrel per day shortage of oil, which means, as we keep saying, we expect some sort of major crisis to come in the autumn. The other thing is the U.S. Treasury 30-year auction, the worst results since 2007, immediately before the Lehman crisis. Everything is still pointing towards a big black swan event in the autumn, but again, it's not going to happen yet over the summer, but there are many other signs that the Khazarian mafia is, really on the brink. For example, the Yemeni people are increasing their war against Saudi Arabia. They make it very clear that Saudi Arabia started punishing them and attacking them after they attacked Israel for murdering Palestinians in Gaza. So when Saudi Arabia announced that they created this whole new military alliance with Pakistan and Turkey, that's nonsense. There's no way actual Muslims from Turkey or Pakistan are going to fight for the crypto-Jewish Saudi royals working for, the Khazarian mafia and supporting the murder of Palestinians. It's just not going to happen. And the Saudis have lost air power, and now the ground forces are just hired mercenaries who won't fight. So again, that's something I've been watching. I noticed that the House of Saud, the news site, has been shut down. I suspect that was pressure from the CIA because they're telling too much truth. Now, the other thing we're seeing more reports of mutiny in the U.S. Navy, supposedly blockading Iran. But again, this is not a blockade of Iran. It's a blockade of the United States and Israel, and the whole world knows it. Price of oil is cheap. Price of gasoline is cheap everywhere except the United States and Israel. So, the whole thing is going to continue, and there are more and more prominent people calling for war crimes tribunals. So, the U.S. Congress has indicted Anthony Fauci for contempt of Congress. So, even though he was supposedly given immunity for no matter what he did since 2014, he still refused to talk about what he did. And so that's what they're getting him with. But, he really should be facing a Nuremberg-type tribunal. And I'm not the only person to say this. I want you to listen to the first 1 minute and 20 seconds of this clip of Rainer Fulmick, the German lawyer who started the, war crimes tribunals against the COVID mass murderer. And later you can listen to the whole interview if you have the time. But the point is, this is a very prominent lawyer with an international following. He's now a prisoner of war, but he speaks for many people. So listen to him.
2023.
Okay. So do you think things have changed since then, or have they
Oh
gotten
yeah,
worse?
I think as far as the vaccines are concerned, um, as far as the vaccines are concerned, yes, yes. They
Mhm.
still are very nervous about talk. They still are a bit more pushback. Obviously, the midazolam and morphine, forced euthanization of the vulnerable elderly to create the first wave of deaths due to COVID, and remdesivir or Ritavil in France, remdesivir in America. Um, they still don't want to talk about that because that's pure murder.
It is pure murder, and it was obvious right from the start. The first time I spoke with John O'Looney, things became very vivid, and then I spoke to other embalmers from the United States, and it became even more vivid. So it's to me, it borders on a miracle that no one is going after anyone yet. But I think we'll have to do it with this Nuremberg 2.0 thing.
What this shows is that a critical mass of aware people in positions of power know that something's going to give, and we just don't know when it's going to give. But another thing that's obviously happening is uh, the United States military is falling apart. They've run out of missiles, and they've lost a lot of airplanes. And this is the thing they're not talking about. They cannot build new ones. They don't have the rare earth metals they need to build them. So they're using up the last of the weapons. They have used them up, and that's why they're saying, well, now we're going to try some sort of financial tricks to take down Iran. But that's just nonsense. I mean, I've been talking to the Iranians. They communicate with me, and they make it clear they're not going to negotiate with Trump or the people behind him. They're going to wait for Israel to collapse and be replaced by the nation state of Judea. And now the Yemeni troops are also marching. So that's all going to be simmering away over the summer, but I don't expect anything decisive until the autumn, possibly beyond that. But definitely, there's going to be a huge push in September to finally do something about these people. And another person who's now come out again is Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who you can listen to him in this clip.
In 5 years, we're going to see 415,000 low orbit satellites. Bill Gates says his 65,000 satellites alone will be able to look at every square inch of the planet 24 hours a day. They're putting in 5G to harvest our data and control our behavior. Digital currency that will allow them to punish us from a distance and cut off our food supply. Vaccine passports.
He's talking about all these satellites and this 5G and this attempt to create a digital prison. So he's come out openly now against this giant AI push, which is a form of mind control. And anyway, like I expected, the news cycle is stuck in a kind of a slow motion circling of the drain where we're waiting for the U.S. to inevitably collapse. But while resting here in Canada, I spent some time with two Jewish childhood friends. And it was very interesting because they are fully what I call brainwashed or normies. Their information sources are the New York Times, CNN, the Globe and Mail. In other words, the mainstream propaganda. And talking to them reminded me of this joke. The joke goes like this. There is a man who thinks his wife might be having an affair. So he hires a detective. The detective comes back and reports, I have some bad news for you. I saw your wife meet a man on the street and they went into a hotel together. Yeah, I says, okay, but so they went into a hotel. You don't know what they did there. They're probably just having coffee. He says, no, I followed them into the hotel and I saw them enter a bedroom together. He says, well, did you see them inside the bedroom? I mean, how do you know they weren't just talking? And he says, well, I peeped through the keyhole and I saw them in the bed together. He said, well, were there blankets on top of them? He says, yeah. Well, then you don't know. You can't tell. This is kind of the thought patterns when you confront them with facts about things like 20 million people being killed by COVID vaccines, or that Anthony Fauci is really not a nice person, or anything else. They have their talking points that they've been given by their propaganda media. But even people like this realize that something is wrong. They sense it. So, for example, whoever is acting the role of Donald Trump right now is actually helping wake up people like that, because they're saying, well, how come the president can just enrich himself at public expense by abusing his office? I mean, that doesn't make sense, you know. And they're slowly, even people like this who you know, they don't follow the news, and they're worried about their own lives. But but even them, they understand that there's something dysfunctional and that the system cannot continue as is. The same thing is going with the stock market, where it's long since ceased to be a kind of a collective decision-making forum for deciding what the best investments are, and instead it's a money laundering machine for a tiny group of people who control the U.S. dollar printing machine. A glaring example, of course, is Elon Musk. Everyone was predicting that once the insiders started selling their shares in SpaceX, that the share price would collapse. But as soon as the first insiders started selling, the share price shot up 22%. And my understanding is that they used their magic dollar printing machine to burn the short sellers and harvest some real money with the fake money by manipulating markets. But such a thing is not sustainable, and it's not going to be allowed to continue. But again, the situation will keep festering away without any major moves, I don't think, until later. However, there was, on August 12th, there was an announcement all over the news that there was going to be a solar eclipse and a Perseid meteor shower, very active, and a new moon, and all these things happening. And I heard from my own sources that they were planning some sort of major event, but it didn't happen. My Iranian sources say there was a plan to use Iranian mobile phones to suddenly emit, dangerous sounds that can kill people. And if you don't know about this, look up Dr. Gavreau. He found certain wavelengths of sound that can kill people, and this is banned by international treaty. But apparently there was some plot to have a major cull of Iranian people using phones that was thwarted. And there was also yet another plan to blow up a U.S. aircraft carrier and try to blame it on Iran. All these things fell apart. So we're lucky that their ability to manipulate us with these events is no longer working. And we can expect change, but again, it's not going to happen yet. We're waiting for the Strategic Petroleum Reserve to run out. The U.S. military is already run out of weapons. Now we're waiting for their client states in the Middle East to completely collapse. That's happening in real time with Saudi Arabia. And now we're seeing something similar in Libya. You may recall that Hillary Clinton had Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi killed because he had proposed setting up a new African currency and only accepting payment for Libyan oil with gold. And since the Europeans didn't have the gold to pay for their oil, They went in and stole it. Well, now their puppet government there is under incredible strain. Their facilities are being destroyed. The central bank governor has quit. So this is another one of their client states that's falling apart in real time. And I know they also are trying to do all sorts of stuff with Japan, trying to get Japan to incite war with Russia or with China or whatever. We'll deal with that puppet state in Japan later. Again, we're just waiting for the big kahuna, the Soviet Union of the United States of corporate America, to collapse. And this process is frustrating, and I don't want to give a specific date because dates come and go, but there can be no doubt it's mathematically dysfunctional. They've lost their industry. They have a trade deficit they can't cover. They're running out of oil. Their industry's been hollowed out. They cannot make weapons. And the U.S. military is in revolt because they don't want to fight for Israel, and they don't want to fight for a satanic cult. And we repeat, there is a white hat alliance that's going to offer the United States military a pay raise and the latest weapons and all the industrial facilities they need. All they have to do is liberate the American people from control of this cult. And when that happens, everything else will follow. But even if the U.S. military fails to take action, what is going to happen then is their paychecks are going to bounce, and there's going to be anarchy in the United States. So again, the offers out there for a complete forgiveness of all U.S. debt, and then the United States would be hired to help protect the planet, and they would be the good guys again. And we're waiting for them to answer us. The Dragon family is offering unlimited funding to help rebuild the United States. So again, this is all on the table, but unfortunately, it looks like we're going to have some kind of major systems collapse before the rebuilding of the United States can begin. In the meantime, I recommend anybody and everybody to make sure that whatever is closest to them is working. They have a plan in case the supermarkets run out of food. They have places in the countryside they can go to. They have a certain amount of cash stashed away and non-perishable food stashed away. My own view is that if people have enough dried food in their house, like beans and rice and spaghetti, to last a month, that'll get them through any crisis, because it's not going to last longer than that. But again, in the meantime, summer's going to continue, and I don't expect anything major, so try to relax and charge your batteries, and hopefully, finally, we can finish these bastards off later this year. But if not, we'll keep fighting until they are finished, and there can be no doubt they are losing, and they will lose. Okay, well, that's what I have to say for myself today. Now I'd like to answer questions from readers and viewers.
Hi, Ben. We have our first question for today. Senator Tom Cotton's FY 2027 Intelligence Authorization Act, Section 622, would significantly expand U.S.-Israel intelligence and security integration. How likely is it to survive the legislative process and pass both chambers? And if it does, would Trump sign it given the weight of Zionist pressure?
My understanding is that there's a significant portion of the U.S. military and intelligence community who are ignoring everything Congress and the so-called office of President Trump is doing. And when you have, 98% of Congress and Senate accepting bribes from Israel, they do not represent the American people. And I don't think the intelligence community is sharing anything with them, and they're not going to obey their orders to do whatever Israel asks. It's just not going to happen. Not only that, Israeli intelligence is also in revolt against the Satanists who took over Israel. So no, I wouldn't worry about bills passed by whores. Next question.
Hi, Ben. A month ago, you wrote that the dollar has split into two camps, quote, the BRICS dollar held by non-Americans and the, quote, our dollar tied to the Rockefeller Empire. If the USA corporation collapses, what happens to the dollars Americans hold in their pocket, and what happens to the dollars in their bank accounts? How smooth is the transition, And will the two-tier split become obvious to everybody, and have the BRICS dollar that BRICS dollars actually been what stopped the USA corporation from collapsing already?
I think it's obvious to anybody when you find out the United States cannot buy many things from around the world anymore. And my understanding is that if everything is handled properly, uh, there will be some kind of bank holiday, and the average people will not lose their money, but a lot of these trillionaires are going to have their money confiscated. But whatever happens, it'll be public. It'll be for the good of the average person, and it's not going to be some secret event. But the American people, on average, are not going to lose money, but a lot of trillionaires will, because that's fraudulent money. It's not based on the real world. And as far as the BRICS dollar is concerned, just look at statistics for euro dollars. That's what they sometimes call them. Or look at what happened since 2008. Basically, 2008, the Lehman shock was when they had the split came. And then the only reason the Americans were able to keep the system going after that was they agreed to install a black communist by the name of Barack Obama. In exchange for that, they got $23 trillion, which allowed them to keep going until Trump. And now that money has run out, and they're freaking out, and they're trying to find some way to keep their whole show going. And I keep asking everybody, the Asians and everybody else, to stop financing these mass murderers. But anyway, getting back to it, it'll be some kind of very public thing. It won't be a secret decision, and it's not going to be some kind of reevaluation involving Zimbabwe dollars or stuff like that. It's going to be a public thing that everyone will know about. Next question.
Hi, Ben. Why can't the white hat military simply destroy the fake money printers that keep the Satanists going? And would doing so cause general economic chaos for the majority of Americans? If not, it seems like it should be an easy target.
Well, the problem is that this is something that cannot be decided by the Americans alone. They have to get an agreement with the people who hold all the U.S. debt, and that means mostly China and Japan and some of the Middle Eastern countries. And these countries are saying, we'll write off your debt. All we're asking for you in exchange is to get rid of these Zionist, satanic criminals who hijacked your government. And as soon as that happens, everything will be fine. But unfortunately, the U.S. military cannot act alone. They have to reach a deal with the rest of the world, because it's the rest of the world who owns their debt and pays their salaries at present. Next question.
Hi, Ben. Would you comment on the Q website counting down to October 1st? In the UK, it feels like they are preparing for something, internal war games next year that look like insurrection preparation, and Argentina appears to be moving on the Falklands area again.
I don't give much credence anymore to the Q business, but the fact that they're telegraphing this, it means that they know that something big is coming down in the autumn, and I think they're trying to set up some sort of counteroffensive. So my understanding is they're going to try to impose some sort of martial law in the UK to prevent the removal of the fake King Charles and the removal of the criminal government there. And so there's going to be some kind of an attempt to set up a fascist regime, and it will fail, I guarantee you. But yeah, expect all sorts of moves and counter moves once things heat up in the autumn. Next question.
Hi, Ben. We have our last question for today. How does your White Dragon Society solution provide justice for humanity? If there is forgiveness that could excuse criminals from accountability, shouldn't all high criminals be held accountable with punishments fitting the crimes they've committed? Millions of arrests, and for the unforgivable crimes, thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of executions. In your opinion, what does true justice actually look like?
I think there's a consensus growing that we're going to need some kind of Nuremberg 2.0 war crimes tribunals, and that a lot of people will be executed. But again, we have to distinguish between, for example, people who push vaccines because they sincerely believe they're saving lives, and people who knew the vaccines had toxins in them. So that's why we do need public trials, and I expect that there will be a lot of people getting the death penalty. The problem is we're dealing with a cult that people are born into, and they have no choice but to go along and be killed. And now I'm hearing there may be as many as 4 million Satanists around the world, not 1 million as was originally told by Japanese military intelligence. But do you kill 4 million people because they were born into a cult, or do you re-educate them and just deal with the leadership? That's the thing that humanity has to decide. Personally, I think that the important thing is to make sure that it ceases to exist forever, and that's more important than getting revenge. And that means taking their children away, re-educating them, and putting them under complete supervision to make sure such a thing never happens again. Okay, well, that's what I have to say for myself this week, and hope to see you next week. And slowly, we're going to be headed for the big autumn move. So, again, try to charge your batteries. That's what I'm trying to do. And enjoy the rest of your summer.